Hey everybody, how are you this evening? Welcome and thank you so much for joining us in doing Birthing the Holy. We are so excited about this new book club adventure, and I hope that you have been enjoying reading along with all of us. Today we are going to dive right into our first part. I know the book is split up into four sections, but we've kind of revamped it a little bit for ourselves just to even it out a little bit over these 4 weeks. So we are going to jump right in. And I hope if you had an opportunity to read through the introduction, Christine just does a really good job of breaking down what motivated her to write this book, her feelings, and her personal testimony behind this book. She also starts to break down and go through how the book is laid out. She talks about the archetypes, some of the history behind this, and then also the artwork and really the different ways that you can utilize this book. So again, we're doing it more in a small group format. So we have broken it up into 4 weeks, and we met last night and we had a really great discussion on everything. So as we dive in, the first Marian title that we're going to look at is Queen of the Holy Rosary. And of course, she who guides us in prayer. Her feast day was this past week. It was October 7th. And the beauty of the Queen of the Holy Rosary is really just that. And the beauty of Mary bringing the rosary, this spiritual tool to St. Dominic, this way of prayer and this way of linking ourselves to Mary and calling on her intercession. And so if you don't know some of the history about St. Dominic, he was doing a 3-day fasting retreat up on the mountain when he was appeared 3 angels, and there was a ball of flame, and then all of a sudden Mary appeared to him, and she offered him this tool. This spiritual tool is how it's referenced, and it basically is made up of 15 decades. Each decade, of course, is 10 beads, and called upon to use this. And they used to use it as a guide to pray the 150 Psalms. And so the purpose of the beads is really to represent, it goes a long way back in history of being able to use knots, pebbles, beans, different things to keep track of the prayers that were being said. And it does reference the Jesus prayer, which is also known now as the prayer. And it's short, and it's just, it was used in Eastern Christianity. And the prayer goes, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so such a beautiful, short, sweet prayer that we can all recite. A beautiful thing that was shared last night was this was a prayer one of the girls in the group really likes to say after communion. And so just a perfect way to reflect. And so as we go through, we also learn about the Marian Psalter, which was something that, again, the monks developed the Psalter. It consisted of the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And again, it was all 150 beads broken up into 15 decades. This arrangement became known as the Marian Psalter. And then we have our more condensed version of the Rosary that we all now know. And so there, initially when Mary appeared to St. Dominic, there were 3 sets of mysteries. We had the glorious, the joyful, and the sorrowful that were given to him to pray upon. And in 2002, John Paul II added the luminous mysteries. So that's why we now have 4 sets of mysteries, and each set of mysteries has 5 different mysteries within it that we can reflect on. And so the great thing about the book is it really breaks down. So if you don't have them memorized, which I can honestly say I don't, it's still a work in progress. But obviously the joyful mysteries are my favorite to pray. But as you go through, it gives you a little synopsis, and it takes you through what each of them are. And so this is just a great meditative tool when you're still learning the ins and outs of saying the rosary and committing it all to memory. The other thing that I love is she breaks down the Hail Mary. And this is one of the challenges that I want you to get your journal out this week and challenge yourself. On page 6, she talks about how we can create our own version of the Hail Mary. And so she has a beautiful version that she's created on page 7. And I encourage you to not only go and read that, but then also reflect on that and put pen to paper and see if you can come up with your own version that you would like to pray as well. And so my question on this section that I'd like to ask everybody is, do you have a favorite mystery set of the Rosary that you like praying? Is there one that you gain more out of by saying each time? And again, I always go back to the joyful mysteries. Again, shocker, I know. But even in my worst days, reflecting on those joyful mysteries just brings me so much happiness. It can take me out of my funk that I'm in. So for me, the joyful are definitely my go-to. And my favorite mystery to reflect on, of course, is the Nativity. I've always had a calling for Christmas. The season, the beauty of everything that embodies the Nativity. And so that would be my favorite mystery to reflect on. So I hope that this was a great Marian title for you all. I'm sure for a lot of us, it was somewhat familiar, but there's still plenty to be learned. So as we move through, our next one was Queen of All Saints, she who companions the mystics. Her feast day is August 22nd. And so as we talk about, oh, nope, I skipped over. We got to go back to Queen of the Angels. I knew I missed something. I'm jumping ahead. She who is seated among the angels, her feast day is August 2nd. And so I had on page 11, if you're following along, there was a section that I highlighted on page 11 from St. Thomas Aquinas. And he says, Aquinas proposed that angels are individualized by their species. Whereas all humans form one species, each angel belongs to a distinct species, and so they vary widely in infinite number. He explained the hierarchy of angels, composing of different orders. The seraphim and cherubim were above angels and archangels. And so I had to go do a little research because, of course, I've heard both of seraphim and cherubim, but I hadn't really had much familiarity above and beyond that. And so what I had determined was, in Christian angelology, the highest order of the ninefold celestial hierarchy associated with light, ardor, and purity was the seraphim. The cherubim were a winged angelic being, typically described as attending to God. It is represented in Middle Eastern art as a lion or bull with eagle's wings and a human face, regarded in traditional Christian angelology as an angel of the second highest order of the ninefold celestial hierarchy. So again, just a beautiful connection there. And then Christine continues to go on and give us more saint history on their connection with Mary as the Queen of Angels. And she talks about St. Francis and his call to rebuild the church in Assisi. And St. Bonaventure later on writes about this. And he is talking about this dedication, this devotion that St. Francis had. And with it saying that, flipped my page here too soon, that he's sensing that angels often visited there, according to the name of that church, which from ancient times was called St. Mary of the Angels. He stayed there out of reverence for the angels and a special love for the Mother of Christ. And that was on page 12. And then we go into Hildegard of Bingen. And for any of you who don't know who she is one of the 4 female doctors of the church. If you were able to do Set the World on Fire with us this summer, you got the opportunity to learn a little bit about Hildegard. So we were all very excited to see Hildegard make an appearance and bring in everything. And I think that later on, what I will do is go down a rabbit hole a little bit and research a little bit more with Hildegard. And she was known just for her songs and her love of nature and God's creation, and she would write poems. I mean, she was very artistic. And so they bring in that she had this vision of 9 choirs of angels, archangels, virtues, powers, principalities, dominations, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim, which she depicts in one of her visions as a series of concentric circles. She talks about hearing the choir of angel voices. And so again, I think that she probably had that connection to Mary, Queen of Angels. There was a special bond and a recognition there. And so I think that, again, we have this angelic image that we all can conjure up. And so having that connection with Mary, I can see her, we talked about this last night, of she starts deploying angels where they need to go for what they're needed for, and especially guardian angels. And we started to talk about that as well. And if a guardian angel is somebody that has already, or could be somebody who has passed on and is continuing to watch over us, is it somebody that has already been designated or delegated from heaven to watch over each of us? So there was some really great conversation on that. And so it says guardian angels are spiritual beings who can inspire us on our own journeys in multiple ways. Angels participate in the joy of the vision of God and are united to the divine, wanting what the holy wants, which is to help human beings embrace their own holiness. This is their path of love and service. Mary, as Queen of Angels, participates in this desire of work. So one of the challenges we had, or the thoughts to go back into your journal, is, have you ever thought about your guardian angel? Or have you had an encounter with your guardian angel? And so journal on that. How are they able to guide you and in turn lead you towards Mary and in turn Jesus? And there was a suggestion, again, as we were talking last night, maybe sketch what you think your guardian angel or the different angels would look like. And so I'm not art inclined at all, but I'd be willing to try the exercise just to see where it leads me. So Mary, Queen of Angels, again, was just such a beautiful Marian title and the history around it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Moving on, now we will go to Mary, Queen of All Saints. As I skipped over there before, she who companions the mystics, and her feast day is August 22nd. And so one of the first things I took out on page 20, or on page 17, the church designated some people who have lived exemplary lives of holiness, who expressed a deep intimacy with Source, whose lives were witnesses to the foundation of love, and who upon death were wise and well. These people were given a special place of honor within the communion of saints. These saints are there to help us as models for us to pattern our own lives and pray after. So, I mean, we're all familiar that saints exist. We all have patron saints. We have saints that we call on for their intercession. And what this title starts to bring out for Mary is, again, she is above the unity of saints. She is the next person up. And so she is able to support us in accessing not just the support of angelic presences, but also the support of all the saints who have ever lived. So again, I imagine her deploying them, this army of saints, this army of angels, to come to our aid, our intercession when we need it, and to help us through whatever it is we're going through, whether that be a battle, whether that be a petition, Thanksgiving, whatever it may be, that she is there to help organize all of this. And so as we talk about it, she is the joy of the saints, giving them cause for celebration. She is all reconciler between those who have rejected the divine presence and God. She is the one who advocates for all those who have been abandoned and offers her generous comfort and consolation. And this is all on page 18, but this one specific quote, I had to bold it because it just spoke volumes to me. But she is also the tabernacle of the one the world cannot contain. Her womb is a vessel that can bear what is unbearable. Stop and think about that. I mean, how powerful is that? I mean, she is the tabernacle of the one the world cannot contain. I mean, she was the mother of Christ. She is the mother of all mothers, and she was given this wonderful, wonderful gift to bring God's Son into the world. And so for her to share that beauty, share that wonderment, and just how important that is. I just, like I said, I had to bold and underline that because I just thought that was just such a beautiful way of portraying that. And so as we talk about All Saints, and we look at us trying to be saints. I mean, that's what we're called to do. We're trying to do our best to get to heaven, to get our spouses to heaven, to get our children to heaven, and to become saints. And Thomas Merton talks about this on page 19, and he starts talking about what it means to be a saint. It means to be myself and to truly be oneself. And so the question that I pulled out of this was, again, what does it mean to truly be myself? How can we go about being the true self that is at the heart of who we were created to be? And how do we own that? And how do we live that? And how do we not be ashamed of that while we're glorifying God? And so again, just another great reflection. I would challenge you to go back to your journal and write a little bit about and think about that. So that was Mary, Queen of All Saints. So as we go through the book, we're getting ready to go into their part 2 of the book, and it's hearing the call. And so the piece that I pulled out is, even when the call is to birth something new into the world, we must also embrace the mystery of how things will ultimately unfold. There are no guarantees of an easy path. All we can do is continue to commit moment by moment to showing up for our lives. To reject the call is to reject a journey toward our aliveness. And last night it was pointed out on page 22. And again, this was so beautiful. A calling is a gripping incentive to invest our ego into the service of a higher consciousness. And hearing the call, again, that's exactly what we're challenged to do. You know, we are supposed to go outside of ourselves. As I decrease, He increases. And so we have to get over ourselves. We have to get out of our own way to be able to hear this call and to recognize what it is that we are meant to do, and how we are not only supposed to help ourselves, our spouses, and our children, but how we're called to help others. And so I thought that was just another beautiful part that was taken out, and to give recognition to, because it speaks volumes on what we're meant to do. So as we go into part 2 of the book, that next section, or the next Marian title we're going to go through, is Virgin. She who is whole unto herself. Her feast day is March 25th. And we're back in the Annunciation, and we're getting ready to explore the Gospel of Luke and the angel Gabriel coming down and asking, telling Mary of God's proposal, this to be with child, to carry God's child. And we are entering the scene of Mary's fiat, at her innocence, her purity, and the reality of what her yes will soon mean to all of us. And so we're on page 25, and we start to explore the archetypes. And the Virgin archetype is whole, belonging to herself, and impregnated with divine love. She is who she is because that is who she is. She is free of the dictates of family and culture. The Virgin reconciles all opposites within herself and has everything she needs within to bring new things to life. And so what I loved about this chapter, again, we talked last night, I think we all agreed this was an excellent Marian title. There was so much, you could have highlighted every word in this section, because it talks more, we get lost, and we talk about this in here, that the church tradition around virginity has held quite strongly to Mary's perpetual physical virginity as the dominant aspect of her being. And that's what we think about when we think about Mary being a virgin. But there's so much more to it. There's so much more to her mindset, to her actions, to just who she was as a person, her purity, her feminism, the leadership that she showed. And that's when we start to talk about that this archetype integrates both the feminine and the masculine energies within us. And I think that there's just so much more that we start to dive into with the Mary that we all know. And I think prior to getting into this, I had said, I always think of the statue Mary that you see in church. She's in the blue robes. She's usually holding the infant child Jesus, and she's a new mother. And that's about as deep as it goes. But this section, I feel like, really starts to hit home and take us deeper into who she was and who she was meant to become by being the mother of Jesus, and so of God. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful chapter. And so she has an attitude of being open and available to the divine mystery, to the voice of power of the Spirit in us. In this way, we learn from Mary to live from our own center and our own roots in independence and not in one-sided and alienating dependence. Mary does not ask, how can this be, as I am not worthy? Instead, her surprise focuses on what seems impossible, the act of becoming pregnant without having had intimate relations with a man. And so, again, her fiat was just, I don't want to imagine what it would have been like if she would have said no, because there's so much beauty to unwrap and behold in her yes. And so the other thing we talked about is how wonderful would it be to share this Marian title with young women. There's so much empowerment in this title and what it truly means. And so the Virgin Mary calls each of us to consider our own innate wholeness. What are the messages we receive from family and culture that tell us we are somehow incomplete unless we lose weight, become more productive, earn more money, or gain more success? Claiming the Virgin archetype means not questioning our worthiness and knowing that with every invitation, we hold the power to say yes or no. So many of us feel stretched thin by too many commitments, and we forget that with every yes, we are also saying no to having enough energy for something else that might be important to us. Often this means self-care is necessary to give us the nourishment we need to deeply replenish ourselves, avoid burnout, and be of service in the world. We hit on that last night. One of the ladies really hit home with that last piece. And how do we, as women, balance all of the titles that are on us? And we have that power to say yes or no. And so, again, I think calling upon Mary's strength and her virgin title can offer us so much. And so my question is, how can we use Mary's fiat and virginity as an example in our own lives? So again, another great question to reflect on in this section. Okay, moving on. We are going to Mary, Untier of Knots, sometimes Undoer of Knots. She who loosens constriction. And we also just celebrated her feast day, September 28th. And so the concept of Mary untying knots is initially derived from a work by St. Irenaeus, where he presents a parallel between Eve and Mary, describing how the knot of Eve's disobedience was loosed by the obedience of Mary. For what the Virgin Eve had bound fast through unbelief, this did the Virgin Mary set free through faith. And so we look at Mary as Untier of Knots, and she's this one who counteracts these sins, these frustrations, this anger, these knots that we create for ourselves. And we do it all of the time. Whether we're battling an illness, whether we're battling issues at work or home, we're having conflict with a friend, whatever this anxiety, frustration, anger may be, we create this sin, we create this knot, and it can just, I gave the example last night, it can grow into like a rubber band ball, this massive tangled web. And we want to be so mindful of where those things take us. And we want to call upon Mary when we're in these struggles and ask for her help, ask her to walk us back, ask for that intercession through her Immaculate Heart to lead us to her Son, Jesus, and to say, help me do away with this. Help me untie these knots that bind me within. And so, I think that there is just so much that we can cause ourselves more destruction and pain than what is necessary. And we need to look to Mary Untier of Knots as a healer, as somebody who can mend this hurt that we can feel, this dissatisfaction that we can bring to ourselves. And so we are going to call for her assistance. And again, another beautiful part that was brought out last night on page 33. We may resist our wounds, but the ancient stories tell us the wound is where the jewels are hidden. So through our suffering, through calling upon Mary's intercession, through her immaculate heart to her son Jesus, we are going to find beauty in our suffering and our pain. But it requires us to call upon them to see that, to bring out that beauty. And so this concept, these Mary Untier of Knots, my reflection questions for you on this one. Are there places in your life that cause you to freeze up, to live more narrowly, to reject the call you have been given to live more fully into your gifts and offer them in service to a world in need of healing as well? And this, we're on page 33. Imagine each place in your body, your mind, and your heart where you are holding too tightly to something as a knot that can be gently loosened through Mary's healing support. And again, taking the time to go through that and write that call. And next we move on to Mustafia, she who is chosen. And we're on page 37. This is going to be our last one for this section. And this one brought about a lot of interesting discussion, because I personally have, and not by any ill intent, but I think I've never paid attention to the Islam faith. I don't know much about it. And so this drawing into Mustafia really gave me a glimpse, and realizing, and this is one thing we talked about last night, is Mary, no matter where we are, I mean, she speaks to all. I mean, she is our most holy mother. And so we really look at some of the comparisons, and in Arabic, her name means Miriam, and she is the only woman that's named in the Quran. And the comparisons that are drawn between Christianity and the Quran, that Miriam still had older parents, Imran and Hannah, which can be compared to the likeness of Joachim and Anne, and they had a desire to have this child. And again, she was born with immense grace, just as Mary was. And it says, the Quran states that Mary was chosen by Allah above every woman of every nation, and that Allah had breathed on Mary, and that is then how she conceived the child. The Spirit of God comes over Mary and plants the seed of life within her. The angel says that this birth will be a sign of God's glory to all humanity. And so on page 38, we see this, again, this comparison and how the Quran viewed Mary and what she was called to do. And so it was just an interesting parallel in some sorts to see her recognition and how we can connect in multiple ways. And so with that, I would just say that I am really enjoying this book, and I hope that you all are too. I know there's quite a few different titles. There was way more to dive into than I had even expected, but I'm really glad for it, because I feel like there's been a lot of takeaways for what we've learned so far. So again, I would encourage you to get your journal out. If you feel the need to, go ahead and go through some of those reflection questions. Do some free drawing, freehand with angels, and we will pick things back up next Monday. We will read to page 93. So section 2 will go forward to page 93. So again, I hope you guys are really enjoying this book as much as I am, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.